the lamp enclosed in glass, the glass as it were a brilliant star, and so forth. Thus we see that the word nur is used for both the moon and Allah. Are we going to say that Allah gives off reflected light? I think not. But if you continue to insist that nur, used for the moon, means borrowed or reflected light, and we saw above that Allah is the light, nur, of the heavens and the earth, what is the source of this light, siraj, of which Allah is only a reflection? Think about it. If Allah is named nur, or reflected light, who or what is the siraj? Well, the Quran tells us who the siraj is. But the answer will shock you. In Surah Al-Ahzab 33, 45, 46, we find, O Prophet, truly we have sent thee as a witness, a bearer of glad tidings and a warner, and as a lamp spreading light. Here it says that Muhammad is the lamp spreading light. In Arabic it is wasirajan muniran. Linguistically and spiritually, this is the end of the discussion. Linguistically, siraj and the adjective munir are used together for the same shining thing, the person Muhammad. It's clear munir does not mean reflected light in this verse or in any other verse. It means shining. The people of Muhammad's time understood that the moon was shining, and they were right. Just as the people of Moses' time understood that the sun was the greater light and the moon the lesser light, and they were right. But if you insist that the Arabic words nur and munir mean reflected light, then based on the use of these words in the Quran, Muhammad is like the sun and Allah is like the moon. Does Dr. Naik really want to say that Muhammad is the source of light and Allah is only his reflection? Why are these so-called scientific claims made which no Muslim can support if he makes a serious study of his own Quran? In a dialogue like tonight, it makes honest discussion very difficult, almost impossible. Let us go on and look at the water cycle. Some Muslim authors claim that the Quran shows pre-scientific knowledge of water cycle. What is the water cycle? Here in this slide, you see 4 steps. The first step is evaporation. The water evaporates from the seas and the earth. Second step, it becomes clouds. Third step, it gives rain. And fourth, this rain causes the plants to grow. This is all very straightforward, and everybody knows 2, 3, and 4. Even if they live in a town, they know that clouds come and rain comes and their flowers grow. But what about step 1, the evaporation? You can't see it. It's difficult. And the Quran does not have step 1. Now we're going to look at a prophet from the Bible, a prophet from 700 BC, Prophet Amos, and he writes, "He who made the Pleiades and Orion, who turns blackness into dawn and darkens day into night, and then who calls off for the waters of the sea," stage 1, and pours them out over the face of the land, stage 3. The Lord Yahweh is his name. And one other prophet is Job in 36, 26, 28, at least 1,000 years before the Hijrah. He says, "How great is God, beyond our understanding. The number of his years is past finding out." Stage 1, he draws up the drops of water, which distill from the mist as rain. That's stage 3. And then the clouds are mentioned, stage 2, which pour down their moisture and abundant showers fall on mankind. So here in the Bible, this difficult stage 1 is there from more than 1,000 years before the Quran. Now let us go on and look at mountains. The Quran has more than a dozen verses stating that God placed firm and unmovable mountains on the earth. And in some of these verses, the mountains are listed as either a blessing for believers or a warning for the unbelievers. One example of this is found in the Surah Luqman, 31, 10, 11, where the mountains are one of 5 warnings. It says, He has created the heavens says he has created the heavens without supports that you can see, and has cast El-Ka onto the earth firm mountains, Rawasia, lest it should shake with you. In the prophets, the Lenabiyah, 21:31, as one of 7 warnings, we read, and we have set on the earth firm mountains, lest it should shake with you, with them. Finally, in the B, Nahl 16:15, says, and he has cast El-Ka onto the earth firm mountains, Rawasia, lest it should shake with you. We see then that the believers and unbelievers are told that Allah has done this great thing. He's thrown down and placed the mountains so that the earth will not shake violently with them. Therefore, we must ask ourselves, what did they understand? In the next 2 verses, another picture is given. The news, Anaba 78:6-7. Have we not made the earth an expanse and the mountains as stakes, El-Jibala Otadan, as those used to anchor a tent in the ground? And then the overwhelming, El-Ghashiyah 88:17-19. Do they, the unbelievers, not look at the mountains, El-Jibal, how they've been pitched like a tent? Here men are told that the mountains are placed as tent pegs. Tent pegs keep the tent stable. So again, the idea is put forward that the mountains will keep the earth from shaking. A third picture is presented in the word Rawasia, used for mountains. This word comes from the Arabic root arsa, and the same root is used for the Arabic word for anchor. To throw out or cast the anchor is El-Ka al-Mirsa. So instead of cast the anchor to keep the ship from moving, we have cast the mountains to keep the earth from shaking. From these pictures, it is clear that Muhammad's followers understood that the mountains were thrown down like tent pegs to keep a tent in place, like an anchor to hold a ship in place, to stop the earth from moving, i.e. limit earthquakes. But in fact, this is false. The forming of mountains causes earthquakes. Therefore, these verses present a definite problem. Dr. Maurice Bukai recognized this and discussed them in his book, The Bible, the Quran, and Science. After quoting the above verses about mountains, he says, modern geologists describe the folds in the earth as giving foundation to the mountains, and the stability of the earth's crust results from this phenomenon of these folds. When asked about this, Professor of Geology Dr. David A. Young says, while it is true that many mountain ranges are composed of folded rock, and the folds may be of large scale, it's not true that the folds render the crust stable. The very existence of the folds is evidence of instability in the crust. In other words, mountains don't keep the earth from shaking. Their formation caused and still causes the surface of the earth to shake. Geological theories at the present time propose that the hardened crust of the earth is made of sections or plates, which slowly move in relation to each other. Sometimes the plates separate, like North and South America separating from Europe and Asia, and Europe and South Africa. And sometimes they go together, and they slide next to each other, and they bump into each other. And then they cause earthquakes. An example of this time of mountain formation is found in the Middle East, where the migration of Arabia toward Iran has resulted in the Zagros range in Iran. In many parts of the world, as one travels along the roads, one sees a hillside where the sandstone layers, which were horizontal when they were deposited, are now sticking up at angles. And so here you can see these sandstone layers, which were horizontal in the beginning, now they're sticking up at 75 degrees, where they were pushed up there by an earthquake, by the mountains being formed. Sometimes the plates get caught on each other and stop sliding. During this period, great forces are built up. When the forces of friction are overcome, the piece of plate that was stuck lurches forward, causing the shock wave of a thrust quake. And all of a sudden it goes thunk like this. In a recent earthquake, it was calculated that the Cocos plate in Mexico suddenly jumped forward 3 meters. Well, if your house suddenly jumped 3 meters, it would be a catastrophe. Another type of mountain is that formed by volcanoes. Lava and ash from inside the earth are thrown out and piled up until a high mountain is formed. even from the bottom of the sea. And we can see this kind of action in this picture. I hope you can see it. Not clear, is it? The ocean crust is right here, and the continental crust is there, and the oceanic crust is going down under the continental crust, and mountains have been formed here. Here's a volcano, and here is the magma, or the molten rock, going up through the volcano. And here's another volcano with magma going up. And so this is how the mountains are formed, and earthquakes are formed. In the case of some igneous mountains, molten rock intrudes into the throat of a volcano's opening and cools, form a relatively dense intrusion, which extends below the surface of the earth. So if this got stuck and sealed, then it would be like a plug. However, it's not a root. It does not bear the weight of the mountain. It's really a plug. Therefore, on occasion, pressure builds up under the plug, and the volcano explodes, as happened in the South Pacific at Krakatoa in 1883, when the whole island was blown away. And it happened in Mount St. Helena in our days, when the mountain was blown away. We can conclude from this information that mountains were formed originally with movement and shaking, and that now, in the present, earthquakes are caused by their continued formation. When the plates buckle over each other, there are earthquakes. When the volcanoes erupt, there can be earthquakes. However, it is clear that the followers of Muhammad were understanding these verses to say that Allah threw the mountains down as tent pegs or anchors to keep the earth from shaking. Throwing the mountains down into the earth may be poetry, but to say that mountains keep the earth from shaking is a severe difficulty, which is out of step with modern science. Now we're going to take a little look at what the sun says about the Quran says about the sun. In the Surah of the Kahf, 1886, it says, until when Zul Qarnayn, that's Alexander the Great, reached the setting of the sun, he found it set in a spring of murky water. I'm sorry. In 20th century science, the sun does not set in a spring of murky water. And then in the criterion, Al-Furqan 25:45-46, it says, hast thou not turned thy vision to thy Lord, how he prolongs the shadow? If he willed, he could make it stationary. Then do we, God, make the sun its guide. What about this? As the sun's, if you think of the sun overhead, you have no shadow or a little tiny shadow. And then as the sun goes down, your shadow gets longer on the other side. Well, the sun is stationary in relation to the earth. It's not what causes the shadow to shift. The rotating earth guides the shadows. So if you demand 20th century accuracy, the surah should say, the rotating earth causes the shadows to change. I will look at a different subject, Solomon's death. Whether this is science, I don't know. Maybe sociology. Solomon's dead. He's propped up on his staff. It says the jinns worked for him as Solomon desired. Then when we decreed death upon Solomon, nothing showed them his death except a little creeping creature of the earth, which gnawed away his staff. And when he fell, the jinns saw clearly how, if they had known the unseen, they would not have continued in the humiliating penalty of work. So here's Solomon. He's dead. He's propped up on his staff, like a wakif in Morocco, overseeing only a road gang. And no cook comes to ask him for what he wants for dinner. And no general comes for orders.